I know one of the biggest things for me a little while, a year or so ago, when Dean asked me to become part of this, is I didn't feel that I was educated enough or could contribute that way because I wasn't very active in politics. Yes, I voted. I got pissed off more than anything, watching everything, and I didn't know if I could do anything because I wasn't very knowledgeable. And just a few things that she covered tonight shows you how you don't have to be very knowledgeable, but you can get the knowledge and you can learn. And the next guy I'm going to bring up, every time I'm around Ron, I definitely learn something. I'm very impressed with his ability to retain information and then be able to speak it very well. A lot of times I've got great things going on up here, but they never make it here. And if they do, they get all messed up from here to here. I don't know what happens. It's only a couple of inches, and this ain't all that big anyway. My head is, but my brain ain't. So Ron's always very impressive with the way he speaks and the education that he has. And I've been asking him about that over the past couple of months, and a lot of it is just things that he's been through and the things that he's learned by trial and error. And you know, we all gotta be willing to stick our neck out a little bit if we want to learn some things. And Ron sure has stuck his neck out. We certainly appreciate and value him as a leader on our group here. So ladies and gentlemen, your next speaker, it's going to be good. Give it up for Mr. Ron Bolts from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania.
I'm going to move pretty quick through this to save time for our featured speaker. It's an important topic, I believe. I'm here to talk to you about a couple of plans that have been floated around to downsize the legislature. And you know, when you ask most people, you know, do you agree with this? Is this a good thing? Almost instinctively, people say, well, heck yeah, you know, we can have a few less politicians, you know, and we can save a couple bucks, I'm all for it. And so that's what made me want to speak to you tonight about this, because this is really a bad idea. And I'm going to explain why. This may be a quote-unquote small government type plan as far as the physical size of the legislature, but in terms of limited government, this does exactly the opposite, so we need to be aware of that. Sponsors of the current bill are Saylor in the House, who is on his way out, he's retiring, and Scarnati in the Senate. And they claim their goal is to, of course, reduce the cost of the legislature. But I believe these are only talking points because they realize that cost really resonates with the people, and people's apathy about politicians these days. Again, they think, well, if we can have fewer of them, we're better off. Before I get into the cost reduction side of this proposal, I want to tell you exactly why I think this is a bad idea. And one of those reasons is because I believe this has the potential to change the state of Pennsylvania from a purple state to a blue state. And of course, we all know by purple what I mean is, you know, we're a state that has full Republican control of state government, at least for the time being, until January. But we often elect Democrat governors, we often elect Democrat presidents, and so forth, so they consider us a purple state. I believe that if we reduce the population or the representation, what you're going to end up having is you're going to have areas like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Scranton, and so forth. On a percentage basis, they're going to end up with more representation than the rural areas have. That's a big problem for us as liberty-minded folks. The current proposal would reduce the House by 50 members and the Senate by 5. Now, Republicans currently, as pre-election, as of right now, hold a 4-seat advantage in the Senate. This proposal would reduce the Senate by 5. So, if everybody here realizes that even with Republican majorities over the past 4 years, we've gotten basically nothing done. You know, a big reason for that is our liberal Southeast Republicans, who are really beholden to the same unions that a lot of the liberal Democrats are, namely the PSEA. So even with complete Republican control, we're still not getting things done. So we need a big enough conservative, I'm going to try to get away from the Republican-Democrat thing, but we need a big enough conservative, liberty-minded majority to override even the Republicans in the Southeast. Where I come from, Schuylkill County, our Democrats are more conservative than the Philadelphia Republicans are. So that shows you what we're up against. So again, we reduce the size of the legislature. Those areas keep their representation. Us out here, us folks in rural areas, guess what? We take the hit. So, moving right along. Some of them won't be better off, of course, with a few of the good ones left. But as far as the Democrats go, there are probably a few Democrats who go into, well, maybe not this audience, but some audience might think, well, this Democrat, this sounds good to me. Again, if you're a Democrat in a rural area, you need to watch out as well, because what you're going to end up seeing is even more of your tax dollars going from your district, your school, going to the Philadelphia area. A good example of this is currently was the recent transportation bill. Now, as a constitutional, conservative, liberty-minded, whatever label you want to put on me type of person, I realize that transportation infrastructure is a legitimate core function of government. There is no doubt that is a role of government, and I don't disagree with that. My problem is that while you're buying your own vehicle, you're paying for your own insurance out here in the rural areas, you're maintaining your vehicle, you're paying for your gas, you're paying your gas tax to fix our roads. Part of that bill funnels some of your gas tax money to mass transit in Philadelphia. So rather than letting the free market work, letting them raise rates on the people that are using it, or cut costs, combination of the two, you and I are paying for our own transportation while we're subsidizing theirs. And again, we reduce the size of the legislature, let them have their representation, we reduce ours. You're only going to see this problem get worse. And really, I can say the same about the public school system. Well, we all know that the way we fund our schools is completely broken to begin with the school property tax, but beyond that, the school funding fund, that's broken as well. We have a lot of schools that get most of their money from the state. Well, we're out here losing our homes, paying property taxes to keep our children educated. There are several school districts around the state that get almost all of their money from the state, which means your tax dollars and mine. So again, we're paying property taxes to keep our schools afloat locally, to educate our children, and we're also subsidizing the inner city schools. Now, I will say that it's not only inner city schools that receive a lot of money from the state, but a good share of them are in those districts. So once again, what do you think is going to happen when they keep their representation and we lose ours? I say we're going to end up funneling even more money into their schools, which is going to keep it away from yours. Another reason to oppose this bill. This bill greatly benefits incumbents. And there are several reasons for that, but you can ask anybody who's ever run a countywide election, a senatorial district, as Mr. Wagner will be speaking shortly, has done. It requires a lot of money and a lot of time to reach that size, that amount of voters. Especially in the House Senate, or the state Senate rather, you're talking about almost 4 times the size of a state representative district. So for example, right now currently we are seated in Senator Harlow's district. And if you look at his past campaign finance records, the last election that he was involved in, he spent almost $500,000 to get elected. So I'm not saying this to pick on Dave. I'm simply saying that this really isn't even out of line. This is pretty much commonplace. There are a lot of elections that are much bigger in scope than $500,000, but that's the amount of money he obviously felt necessary was to reach the number of voters that he needed to stay off a primary challenger and also win in the general. Now, of course, a huge portion of that money comes from where? It comes from the Republican Party. It comes from the Senate Republican Caucus, or whatever their PAC is called. So, again, you got Scarnati, Pileggi, even Pat Brown, some of these other guys throwing big money at their fellow legislators. How hard is it going to be to run against one of these guys in an even bigger district where it requires even more money, and you're going to have to reach even more voters? With a $500,000 price tag, we're working away from having average folks being able to even have a chance at these types of elections. So, their PACs, we reduce the size of the legislature, guess what? They have more money to spend on each individual legislator than they did before. This doesn't hurt them a bit, it helps them. So, of course, we know they're more concerned with, these guys are in leadership, appeasing leadership so they can get these campaign dollars than they are doing what you and I send them there to do. So, of course, our speaker here tonight would be the exception to that. But, you know, that's what we're up against. We reduce the legislature again, we're going to be seeing a lot more of this type of thing. Now, again, imagine trying to form a grassroots campaign to take on that task, and you're going to make it even harder when they have more money to spend on their guy, and we have more people that we're trying to reach with whatever resources we can come up with. And speaking of spending more money on the legislature, we have the lobby groups. Again, PSEA. Now, with less people to influence, they have more money, of course, again, to spend on each individual legislator to get their way. They have more money to hand to these guys for their campaigns, and of course, that's an even greater task for us to try to overcome. So, people that put this up as a good idea, I just can't fathom a couple of the reasons that they say that this is a good idea. Of course, the first one is to reduce costs. The second is, well, there's too much gridlock in Harrisburg. We can't get anything done if we have few people. There's going to be fewer voices out there. There's going to be less gridlock, and we can move things along. Well, in the case of SB 76, yeah, I would say we probably all agree that gridlock, we're not a big fan of it. But this is a double-edged sword. What happens if you have a bill that's going to raise your taxes? What happens if you have a bill that's going to increase regulation? What happens if you have a bill that's going to take some of your Second Amendment rights away from you? You're going to be awful happy for a little bit of that gridlock and have your representation there under those circumstances. So I would also say, well, let's go along with your theory. Let's say we reduce the gridlock and it saves costs. Well, then why don't we stop it at 5 and 50? Why don't we cut the legislature in half? Why don't we just cut it in half? Less gridlock, right? It's going to save us a couple bucks. Well, if that's good, let's cut it in half again. Let's get even fewer. And let's follow this to its logical conclusion. If we're going to go down that road, can't we now argue, why don't we get rid of the legislature? Why don't we just let Governor-elect Tom Wolf make all decisions? He won't have to fight with anybody. He won't have to, there's no holdups, there's no nothing, no change, no ties, no nothing. None of your reps can be there to form any of this gridlock, and look at all the money we're going to save. Obviously, nobody would be in favor of that. And I'm not trying to say that we're going down some slippery slope where that's going to be the end result of this bill. What I'm simply saying is that's the direction that this takes us. And that's not the direction that we want to go. So let's take a look now at their claims of reducing the cost, because that's what they're putting out there, so let's address that. Again, this scheme would reduce our total size of 253 House and Senate members combined to about 198, which represents about a 22% reduction. In 2011-2012, we spent about $34 million on salaries, pensions, and benefits, plus an additional $7 million for travel expenses and per diems for our senators and representatives. So you could say, in theory, to get a rough idea what this would save, if there's a 22% reduction in the number of legislators, that total that I just read off comes about $41 million. We could theoretically say that would save us 22% of $41 million, right? Seems logical. That comes out to about $9 million. You could also argue that now we can cut staff. I couldn't really find a definitive figure on what staff costs us, so this might be a little low, but I did find something on the line item on the budget that read salaried officers and employees that showed $10.4 million. So theoretically, we take 22% of that, tack that on. So I want to give them all the benefit here with their cost-saving scheme that they're trying to shove down our throats. Add that on, we come up with about $11.3 million of savings if this bill would pass. Certainly, it's nothing to sneeze at. I'm a penny pinching kind of guy, believe me. When I used to go to board meetings, before I was a school board member, I used to sit there and I used to cringe every time they'd be throwing around $10,000, $20,000, and I finally questioned, and they said, well, in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't that much, you know? And I said I would never do that, and here I'm going to stand in front of you and I'm going to do exactly that, but it's for a different reason. In the grand scheme of things, $11.3 million versus, at that time, a $27.2 billion overall state budget really is nothing, because it accounts for about 0.04% of the budget. That's what they're going to save by taking your representation away from you. Currently, we have a $29.1 billion budget. $2 billion we grew since then. So really the figure is even less than that 0.04. And the entire legislative body only costs us about, well, only, I don't want to say only, but it makes up about 1% of our overall budget. And my point of this is not to say that's not significant money. My point of this is to say that if we really want to do this to save money, in a $29+ billion budget, do you think we could come up with 0.04% cut somewhere? Do you really think we're down to the bone that far in a $29 billion budget that we need to take your representation away from you to save money? I would say no. So let's look at some other possible cost savings. Let's look at PSERS and SERS. This problem, last year alone, now I'm talking about not the pension system, I'm speaking just the increases to the pension system because of the current crisis, cost us $520 million last year, extra. This year they're projecting $466 million more dollars, extra. We're already about 3 or 4 years into this, we got a few more to go, this is about a 10-year ramp up or so, stays that high all the way out to 2036. Put that up against their $11 million savings while they sit around in Harrisburg and don't do anything about it. If you want to start being serious about saving us money, how about we address the pension issue? You know?
Amen.
So, yeah. But of course, no, we can't do that. Why not? Well, we can't go against PSEA now, can we? Of course not. We'll just keep bankrupting our schools, putting your children's education at risk. We'll keep kicking you out of our homes because we don't want to change the pension system. My goodness. Heck, we can't even change it for new hires. Even that's beyond the scope of what these people are willing to do. But we're going to save you $11 million by getting rid of your representation. Well, thank you very much. How else can we save some money? How about prevailing wage? Why don't we get rid of prevailing wage? Now, I have no figures, and it would only be a guess if I stood here and told you how much that would save me. I didn't have time to look it up. But $11 million, we get rid of prevailing wage, I'm sure we can definitely approach or probably surpass 11 million savings. I can tell you at our school district right now, you know, with all the construction that goes on, anything over, I think it's $100,000 has to be prevailing wage. We're just putting on secure entrances. We're talking about that at our school. We're talking about doors, people. It's going to cost us $200,000 just to put secure doors on our buildings. So anything under $100,000, you know, they patted themselves on the back when they raised prevailing wage, so I think it's $100 grand now. It does nothing for us. It really doesn't. These projects are expensive. What else? Dare I say welfare reform? Enough said. But finally, the last thing I'd like to offer, how about this? How about a part-time legislature? Now that's intriguing. Part-time legislature. Do you guys know that Pennsylvania is one of only 3 states in the country that has a full-time legislature? You know what company we keep with that? California and New York. Yeah. Think about that. We're a real good company there, huh? So they call it full-time legislature in Pennsylvania. I call it full-time pay with part-time work. That's personal, right? So do you guys realize they have about 80 to 90 session days a year? 80 to 90. That works out to 18 5-day work weeks, 18. That's a third of the year. How many of you folks put in a 5, 6, or 7-day work week? I would say that you're probably putting in more than 18 of those in a 52-week calendar year. So they're working about a third of the year. Of course, in the spring we have the budget, so we can't do anything. In the fall, we're all worried about our general election, so we squeeze everything in the middle of summer. Oh, and hey, by the way, if we're on an even number year like we are right now, all the work you guys did for SB 76, guess what? At the end of the year, it's no good anymore. You can start all over again and go back to committee. Thank you very much. So I would say, again, full-time pay, part-time work. So, again, what will we save with a part-time legislator? Well, Pennsylvania pays about $84,000 a year to our legislators. And this figure is actually low because, of course, we just had an automatic COLA, right? We just had an automatic increase, which, by the way, our own Dean Klopp was just quoted in the Reading Eagle, and I would like to thank the Reading Eagle for taking the time to really reach out to us and care what the Campaign for Liberty has to say on that issue. But $84,000 a year, it's really higher than that, but we'll go with the 84. Add to that a Cadillac health care plan, golden parachute pension, and a per diem, and the average Joe legislature is pulling in about $135,000 to $145,000, depending on how much per diem, mileage, and all that type of thing you're looking at. So we're going to say we'll say about $135 grand a piece. And of course, those in leadership are even more. Scarnati's up there bumping probably around 130. Add in all these perks and he's closer to 200,000 than he is 100,000. So let's make them part-time. Let's cut their salary. What are we going to cut it to? Well, how about we cut it to $8,500 a year? No pension, no health care. Which, by the way, keep in mind, I'm going to read you something here. They currently get a salary, a pension, a per diem. They get increased pay for leadership positions, and they get automatic pay increases, as we just saw. Has anybody here ever read the Pennsylvania Constitution on compensation for legislators? Yeah, well, I'm going to read it to you now so those folks who've never read it. Keep all those things in mind. Article 2, Section 8, compensation. The members of the General Assembly shall receive such salary and mileage for regular and special sessions as shall be fixed by law, and no other compensation whatever, whether for service upon committees or otherwise. No member of either house shall, during the term for which he may have been elected, receive any increase of salary or mileage under any law passed during such time. How many times are they breaking the Constitution that they swore oath to, just in their salary alone? I think that needs to change. So let's change it. Let's make them part-time, take away all those perks. So, going from $135K down to $8,500 to savings of $126,500 per legislator per year times 253 legislators for a total of about $32 million, about 3 times the savings of taking your and my representation away from you. Do you think they're going to like that idea? I don't think so. Of course, we could also probably cut staff there for even more savings, but just for now, we'll stick with the $32 million figure, and we'll go with that. So perhaps you're thinking, well, really, can we really go down to $8,500 a year? Is that really reasonable? Is it even fathomable? Well, I would say, well, let's look at Texas. What does Texas do? They pay theirs $7,500 a year. That's $1,000 less than I'm proposing. What else does Texas do? They meet once every 2 years. They're part-time legislature. So now the next question is going to be, yeah, but Ron, come on. Once every 2 years, and I would say, well, yeah, it's working for them. Then you're going to say, possibly, you would say to me, well, what can they possibly get done? Meeting one time every 2 years, give them $8,500. Well, here's my answer to you. In 2007, Texas passed 1,672 bills during their session. Pennsylvania, during that same time, passed 1/5 of that amount of legislation. And I will tell you that those 1,672 bills that they passed, it was important stuff. It wasn't new vanity license plate bills. They have time, they only have that amount of time, they get to the issues, and they get things done. Not quite what our legislature does for us. Now, perhaps, even after this example, you think, well, you know, the legislature, I still think it's too big. I just still think it's too big. So, all right, I'm going to talk about another state. How about New Hampshire? Everybody knows little old New Hampshire up in New England. What if I told you New Hampshire is a part-time legislature? The state's about 1/5 the size of Pennsylvania geographically, and only 1/10 the size of Pennsylvania in terms of population. 1/10 the size of us. New Hampshire has 424 legislators, while we have 253, with 1/10 the population. By comparison, their voters and taxpayers have 16 times the amount of representation in their state capital than do you or I. So, obviously the next question after that, how can they afford 424 legislators in little old New Hampshire with only 1/10 the taxpayers to foot the bill? Well, you're probably going to not believe me when I tell you this, but in case you don't, you can research it on some of the links that are on those sheets that were passed out. They pay their guys $200 stipend. $200 stipend. That's what New Hampshire legislators get. It's a citizen legislature. That would allow, imagine the possibilities. Not only would that save incredible amounts of money, that would open the door for the average Joe folks to go up there who aren't going there to be a career politician, who aren't going up there to get the perks from the lobbyists, who are probably going to go there. Of course, you still have power-hungry people who are going to want to go, but for the most part, you're going to probably go there because you want to be there to do the right thing. So that would, if we go ahead and do that, by the way, it would jump our savings up to about 36.7 million versus their 11 by taking your representation away from you. I just hope that's something you guys would like to think about, because my fear is that I've seen a couple polls on this, and again, people, about 80% when they hear this plan, they approve of it. Now this would be a big lift. It would have to go through 2 or 3 sessions. It would have to get, I think, 2/3 vote, 2 or 3 sessions in a row, and then it would go to voter referendum. But that voter referendum at this point doesn't look very promising on the Liberty end of the spectrum, because I think people aren't thinking this thing through. So, Dean, what am I doing on time here?
You have a couple minutes.
Okay, a couple more minutes. Real quick, I'm going to just run down. During my research for this, I came across a website that's on there. It gave me a lot of stats about different state governments. And there was a section that actually had this topic that said proponents for larger size legislatures and smaller. And of course, the proponents for larger size legislatures, the arguments rather, are pretty much what I already ran through. The more members, the more representation. One political party can more easily dominate smaller size legislatures. I touched on that. Smaller size legislature increases rivalries between rural and urban areas. I touched on that. Pretty much everything that I ran through. But the proponents for smaller size legislatures, some of this stuff is just ridiculous. The first one, fewer legislators do not mean less responsive legislators. Using modern communication mechanism, the legislator can easily reach and be reached by many more constituents. So they actually want me to believe that because we have email now, that these guys are all of a sudden going to be, you know, more, it's not going to hurt your representation, and these guys are going to be, you know, easily accessible by you. Obviously, when you go up the chain, you know, most people probably know a few of your school board members. You probably grew up with them. You probably know maybe some of your township supervisors. As you go up to the chain to the county level, you probably still know a few, maybe a little less. Then you get in your state rep. You're maybe not so familiar with him, but maybe had a meeting once or twice, get in the state center, so on and so forth, all the way up to the president. Obviously, this is not going to give you any more be in touch with your legislator. Smaller legislature will be better discussion and clearer debate, no more opportunity for each to make his own views heard. That's simply another way of saying you're giving more power to fewer people. Completely against that. Larger legislative bodies cost more, we just debunked that. Legislative elections will be more competitive. No, it will be less competitive for the reasons I said earlier. More costly, more people to reach, more expensive. Here's my favorite one, I'm going to close with this. In a smaller legislative body, the role of a legislator will be more prestigious and satisfying. Well, isn't that nice? Doesn't that help us? How does that help me? We go up to Harrisburg, these guys already have big egos. I don't think we need to give them any more prestige. I'm already tired of calling them senator and representative, to be honest with you anyway. So anyway, hopefully that will change your mind a little bit. If you did think this was a good plan, give you something to think about, thank you very much for listening.
We do have time for a question or two for Ron. Honestly, when I first... Battery's dead. Honestly, when I first read about this speech that Ron was doing, I was a little confused because I immediately thought, why not downsize? Why not save that money? I thought just like 80% of the people that are being called are answering about this. And I actually asked Ron, I said, help me understand why that's a bad thing. And obviously, after what he just shared with us, and he didn't even share that much time with me, but I quickly learned that that was a bad thing. So I think that's one of the great things about coming to an event like this, is that you actually get, dare I say it, the truth. And that's pretty good, right? Truth will set you free. We do have a question for Ron. Look at that, I changed the battery while I spoke. They say only women can multitask. But my wife can do like 8 things at one time. Here we have John.
Ron, are you familiar with the task force that was put in place by the General Assembly in 2006? And they were tasked with the job of determining how school districts spent their money. And if they thought any money could be saved, would they make recommendations how that could happen? In 2007, that task force turned in their final report, and they had a page and a half of recommendations how they felt $1 billion could be saved over a 5-year period of time. Is anybody aware of that report? And if not, I'll be happy to send a copy, a digital copy, to anyone who wants it, to see me after the meeting. And by the way, how many of those recommendations do you think have been put in place so far?
Probably none.
You got it. Big goose egg.
Thank you very much, John. I love educated people. It's awesome.
Ron, we both have fought the same fight. How do we get the people to get their head out of their day bargain?
I don't know, I guess you're gonna have to go door to door with Campaign for Liberty, how about that?
You can do that on Saturday morning, as a matter of fact. Sledge, you had a question?
Yeah. Are you aware that New Hampshire pays about the same amount of money for their entire legislature that we pay one of ours?
Yeah, well, I can believe that when you're $200 for a stipend, that's easily believable. Yeah, right there.
Is that it?
Well, yeah, we pay $84,000 a year plus about $125,000 a year. It would cost $86,800 to pay 434 representatives.
Right on, that's-
Imagine that. All right, yes, sir. What you got?
What about the possibility of going to a term limits for these legislators?
I'm all for it, you know, I didn't used to be, but I'm all for it now. Bring on the term limits, I'll take it. I don't think they're gonna term limit themselves, I don't think they're gonna vote themselves into a part-time legislator either, but, you know, it's good food for thought.
All right, we got one more.
Whenever you hear anything come from the legislature, go the other direction, such as the Patriot Act, such as downsizing the legislature, and I can keep on and on and on and on and on, but think the other way.
Well, as Dean said earlier, if you believe what they tell you, how does that benefit them? Thanks a lot.
Wait, we got one more. I'm sorry.
Mr. Wagner.
Ron, sort of on point to stay focused on the presentation, there are, you throw out the legislative numbers, there are actually 2,600 staffers.
Is that the number?
2,600 staffers to 253 House and Senate members, and they're spread across in district offices and in Harrisburg. If you just take $60,000 times 2,600, it's 156 million. If you had, I think it's probably closer to like 75,000, which would include benefits, health insurance, so that puts you at 200 million. So it just gives you an idea, you know, of the size there. I want to ask you a question, because this is I appreciate your comments. What if, and I agree with the 7, because I have a different opinion now that I'm on the inside, because I'm taking very seriously what I do, and I'm running basically, 16 hours a day, 4.5 days a week, and doing some stuff on weekends. What if we were to reduce the House to 150? From 203 to 150, leave the Senate to 50. The big problem we have is the House members are every 2 years. And I want to talk about that briefly, but you've got this vicious cycle. What if we could get to 150 and we had a 4-year term, or 4-year term in the House? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts there are the same concerns, because I'll use my congressional district as an example. I'm in the 17th congressional, and we have Matt Carter. I know I'm not talking state levels and stuff, but I'm just trying to make my point. In Pine Grove, we're pretty much a Republican district. We're a pretty conservative district. A lot of Schuylkill County is, but they gerrymandered us into, with Scranton and so forth. We are 7-4 Democrat district, very liberal Democrat district overall. So, but the point I'm trying to make is, you start taking more representation away from me, you're going to find more examples of that type of situation where if we had more representation, quite possibly, I might have a representative for a smaller Schuylkill County area, peel them off, let them have theirs, but let me have a voice as well. So I would be just as concerned there. I think it's against the opposite direction. I want more representation, not less. I know it sounds counterintuitive right off the bat, but I think the points that I made earlier speak to why I feel that way.
Told you he was awesome. Give it up for Ron Holtz. So, now comes our prize drawing, and that would be for anyone that has a red ticket. How do you get a red ticket, you ask? Well, if you are a veteran of our great country, you should have a red ticket. Also, if you brought a guest with you this evening, you should have a red ticket. If you are one of those two people and do not have a red ticket, that means I missed you. Please raise your hand. Keep it up so that Tom can bring that ticket to you. While he is doing that, one of the things that leadership, Dean and I and a bunch of other folks were talking about at a meeting a couple of weeks ago is this whole deal. My grandmother taught me to be very humble and ask lots of questions. She said, Mikey, she said, you're not all that bright. She told me this when I was really little. She said, you are going to have to ask more questions and work harder than anybody else in school to stay on board. Okay, so that's what I did. I raised my hand all the time, I asked questions, and teachers got sick of it, my friends made fun of me, but I didn't care, I was learning stuff, right? So I'm asking at these meetings, I'm saying to the guys at the meeting, if I'm sitting in that audience, I'm thinking to myself, when Dean and these guys are up here, they sound very polished, they sound very good, and they're going on all these things, and they're going out here and rattling this cage, and they're going over here and rattling this cage, and they're telling people to make phone calls, but they never tell us how. Anybody with me? So, here's the thing. Phone calls. I'm going to touch on that just a hair tonight. A few months ago, we asked you to make phone calls every month. I never knew how to make them. So I would call up, and the sheet that Dean gives out, we can't give you Bibles and books every week, so we try to give you snippets here and there. Well, the sheet said something like, okay, call and urge your legislator to vote for SB 76. Well, what does that mean? You call and you say, hey, I urge my legislator to vote for 76, and you hang up. That's exactly what they want. So I learned to call and ask a question. Where does X legislator stand on 76? And then you allow their little, what do you call them people that work for them? Committee staff. They rustle their paperwork around, and it's amazing how many of them don't have an answer, okay? And they say, well, we'll get back to you, Mr. D'Acosta. I said, okay, great. And I give them like 14 phone numbers. Guess how many calls I get back? None. So how much was that costing us, Scott? How many millions of dollars?
150 to 200 million.
150 to 200 million not to get a return phone call. Okay, so let's fast forward a couple of months to just a few weeks ago when we were asked to call our legislators to ask them where they stood on who they were going to support for Senate Majority Leader. As you know, Campaign for Liberty was instrumental with a lot of other groups that are present tonight in getting Pileggi removed from that seat. So, how do you make that phone call? Well, the little snippet that we gave you said to urge your legislator to vote for someone else. Okay, you do that and they probably don't even write it down and life is good. So I thought, well, I'm going to ask the question. Who, I called everybody on the list. I sat there one night, my boys were with me, I have 14, 15-year-old sons, and they were with me getting their education as well. And we're going down through the list, and I'm calling, I'm asking every single person, hey, who's he going to vote for this, or who's she going to vote for? Well, Dean, Mr. D'Acosta, I'm not really sure. I had one office, one. I called 50-some people. One office said, I know who they're going to vote for, and they told me. You know who that was? Scott Wagner. Bingo. He's here tonight. Bingo. One office. That's the only one that would admit who they were going to vote for. Everybody else, I guarantee they probably knew. They just didn't want to tell us. And then a bunch of them, almost all of them, 85% of them, I made little check marks. You know what they told me? Well, Mr. D'Acosta, that is a secret ballot. Gee, that's funny. I didn't think there were supposed to be any secrets from the American people. Why is this secret? And, okay, if it is a secret ballot, can you call and tell me who he or she voted for? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Get your name and number. How many phone calls did I get? 0. None. I'm still waiting. Yeah, still don't have any. Still waiting. So, if you want to know more about that, I encourage encourage you to put your name on the back list there if you want to get more involved. And the last thing I'll say before we get off of that, and we're going to do our drawing here in a second, is we really need some help as we're growing. We're growing very fast. And there's a few of us who have dedicated our time and efforts. And I'm just a regular guy like everybody else on the committee that just got really upset, and I say pissed off, and I shouldn't, that's bad, but I am. And I needed to do something. Well, I'm finding that we could do things 100 hours a week, and we don't have that kind of time. So if you're sitting in the audience tonight, and you don't see yourself as maybe the controversial guy or gal, and you just want to do some things maybe behind the scenes, we could really use somebody to organize spreadsheets. When we get all these petitions signed, it's just pieces of paper with people's names. Well, they all need to get transferred onto the computer. You don't really even need to know Excel. We can give you a template, and all you got to do is key in those words, okay? So if anyone's willing to do that, you could get more information. Just put your name on the sheet in the back. We would highly appreciate that, because Bryn Schaefer is doing most of that right now. He has 4 kids at home, and I know he's super busy, and quite frankly, we could use his expertise in some other places. So if you're willing to do that, that would be very, very helpful. So we hope you enjoyed that part of our session tonight. All right.